The year 2023 has been a rough one for Dragon Ball fans, as the manga retold the events of the superhero movie at a painfully slow rate instead of diving straight into new and exciting material. But as torturous and annoying the long wait was, the manga added some differences which you can all look back and appreciate, such as Goten and Trunks following in Gohan's footsteps by becoming superheroes as well. The two named themselves Saiyaman X1 and Saiyaman X2 after being inspired by their favorite video game superhero named Clean God. We even see the influence of Clean God in their hero catchphrases that involve mopping up evil. And I feel like this edition was quite nice because it gives these two some much deserved screen time whilst also paying homage to the OG Saiyaman son Gohan. And it seems as if Clean God's influence not only reached Goten and Trunks, but we also learned that Dr. Hedo is a very huge fan of this video game superhero. And one detail that became so obvious to me is that the superhero outfit that Hedo likes to wear is inspired by Clean God's hero costume, which is a little piece of information that adds more context that we didn't get in the movie and explains why Dr. Hedo loves superheroes so much. This directly led us to the third major change, which is the fact that with the help of our new superheroes Saiyaman X1 and Saiyaman X2, Krillin was able to arrest Dr. Hedo. This gave more of an active role to Krillin here as opposed to the movie where there is no mention of who exactly led to Dr. Hedo's 3-month prison sentence. But that is only a small part of Krillin's involvement in Dr. Hedo's case. That's because due to his involvement in his arrest, Krillin was able to do a lot of background research on him and ended up being the one who gave us a presentation on who Dr. Hedo is, his achievements of being a doctor at a young age, his reason and duration of arrest, as well as his family tree that reveals he is the grandson of Dr. Juro, who was married to Vomi. Krillin's usefulness in the movie doesn't end here though, and we'll touch on that in just a moment. But for now, I'm sure you're all aware that this differs from the movie where Carmine was the one who gave us a detailed presentation on Dr. Hedo's character and his background. And during this presentation in the movie, I think you remember the scene where Magenta accidentally spilled tea on himself. Well, due to the manga shortening this section significantly, it completely cut that part out and replaced it with Magenta smoking a cigar instead. And while we are still on the topic of Carmine, we need to take a look back at the scene when he was driving to the Red Ribbon base right at the start of the film. In the movie, we get to see Dr. Hedo's android Hornet named Hachimaru, who is spying on him, that he's doing this whilst inside his car. Meanwhile, in the manga, Hachimaru never managed to infiltrate the vehicle and he was only following Carmine from the outside. Now, remember when Krillin was giving us exposition on Dr. Hedo? Well, he wasn't just giving it to us for the sake of it. Krillin also discovered that the company Red Pharmaceuticals is a front for the Red Ribbon Army and that they're after Dr. Hedo because of his genius of android creation. This naturally transitioned us to the next change, which is the police department sent Krillin to keep an eye on Dr. Hedo on the day of his release, because then the Red Ribbon Army will come and try to recruit him. And to no one's surprise, their hunch was actually correct. Carmine and Magenta arrived in their car to pick up Dr. Hedo upon his release from prison, but by this time in the manga, Krillin was there on the scene. His mission was to follow them in order to secretly discover the location of the Red Ribbon base, but unfortunately Krillin fails this mission because he's spotted by Dr. Hedo, who then sends Hachimaru after him to kick his ass. And as humiliating as that was for him, it was not the only change that was made during Dr. Hedo's retrieval. In fact, there are 3 more. Number 1, when Krillin was battling against Hachimaru, he pulled out his gun and shot the android, which led to it landing on the windscreen of the car. The gunshot, combined with Hachimaru's landing, startled Carmine, causing him to aggressively spin the car around. The same car spinning sequence in the film happened after Carmine tried to threaten Hedo with a gun to join him, who then retaliated by threatening to use Hachimaru's poison stinger to kill him. Number 2, in the film, it appears as if Dr. Hedo was a lot harder to convince into joining them because Magenta had to even show him a footage of Trunks fighting against Frieza and killing him back in Z in order for him to believe his distorted truth of Bulma and his friends being aliens that are planning to take over the world. In the manga, this is cut out completely as Magenta was able to recruit Hedo into his operation using his words alone. The third change here is that, unlike the movie where there's a lot of cars that they drive past, of which one of them belongs to Pan's preschool teacher, Miss Janet, there are absolutely no cars that we drive past in the manga. Now, what's actually interesting about Miss Janet's appearance here is that for the film, we saw her here for the first time and we didn't even know who she was. This differs from the manga whereby the very first scene of the superhero arc in chapter 91 was when we first saw her, as Piccolo picked up Pan from school and went with her to his house. This means that in the manga, we saw Pan's school twice, first here and lastly during the kidnapping scene. This also added another scene that was absent in the movie. When Piccolo was with Pan at his house, Piccolo suggested that she should start training as soon as possible, which sets up their eventual training that we see them do 6 months later, where Pan tries to learn how to fly and fails in doing so. Next up is Piccolo in Gamma 2's first fight. For this part of the story, not much has changed except for the fact that Gamma 2 actually managed to blast Piccolo's arm off using his gun, which means in the manga, Gamma 2 used his gun twice during this fight as opposed to one time when he is delivering the final blow. Another small detail that is easy to miss as a change during this fight is Piccolo's ability to surprisingly see sound effects when Gamma 2 was attacking him in the movie.
Why can I see his sound effects?
In the manga, we also see the sound effects surrounding the panels, but I mean, sound effects are a normal part of the manga and it doesn't seem like he was aware of them. They're most likely just meant for the reader. And when the fight against Gamma 2 concluded, Piccolo followed Gamma 2 into the Red Ribbon base, and the movie first showcased a train driving past with an airplane which flew over it and finally landed into the Red Ribbon base. This whole sequence was completely cut out of the manga, which is a decision that was likely made for pacing reasons. But the next change was an addition instead of a cut. When Piccolo was infiltrating the Red Ribbon base in the film, he got in without any interference or issues, whereas the manga added a scene of Piccolo almost being spotted as an intruder. So what happened is, because he stole the clothes of the soldier that was not supposed to enter into the meeting being held inside, one soldier called him out and alerted the others. But with quick thinking, he explains that it is supposed to be a learning experience to him. That is why he is supposed to get into the meeting, to which he is supported and bailed out by the soldier number 28, who agrees that it will be a good learning lesson for soldier number 94, which is the number of the soldier he stole the outfit from. And it seems like Piccolo had a lot of close calls in the manga, because the second one came when it was time for him to leave the Red Ribbon base after infiltrating it for the meeting. When he was done on a call with Bulma, he immediately flew out of the bushes at super high speed, and one of the soldiers looked confused, asking himself if that was a bird. This scene is completely absent in the movie. He managed to fly out of the Red Ribbon base without alerting anyone. We then immediately cut to Beerus' planet, where we get a full-length sparring match between Goku and Broly. And quite honestly, this was a major improvement compared to the movie, because by the time Goku stops the fight when Broly is raging, we get an understanding that he was trying to help him control his wrath during combat, as opposed to the movie making it seem like Goku wants zero smoke from Broly. So when Goku was still collecting all the smoke from Broly, the manga also gives us a summary of his backstory. This makes sense for the manga specifically because the movie was skipped entirely and only represented using a few panels, which is something I wish they did for this entire superhero arc. But anyway, this overall connects things pretty well so that everyone is aware that the events that occurred in the Broly movie are a part of the manga. The next change was directly caused by their sparring match, and is that we see Whis' staff on the ground, and the damage that is being caused by their brawl is blowing it out of his line of vision. This led to the staff somehow landing behind a tree, so by the time that everyone was chilling and eating, Bulma's call could not reach Whis because his staff was far away and he could not hear it ringing. This is very different from the movie, because when Bulma called Whis in the movie, Whis was not distracted by food, but because Goku and Vegeta's fight had already begun, he was preoccupied watching their battle. And to make things worse, Beerus threw an empty tub of ice cream carelessly, which then landed on the staff and blocked communication. While on the topic of Bulma's communication device, in the movie, she searches for it in her toolbox for a very long time until she finds it, whereas in the manga, her pet dinosaur finds it somewhere else and brings it to her. Now, in both the film and the manga, everyone on Beerus' planet eats before Goku and Vegeta's sparring match begins, but the location in which they ate their food differs. In the movie, they all enjoy their food indoors inside Beerus' house. Meanwhile, in the manga, they all set a table outside and eat outdoors. Another added detail is the oracle fish eating alongside everyone, whereas in the movie, oracle fish was nowhere to be seen. We then move on to the infamous scene of Goku telling Vegeta that meditation is useless. Although the overall conclusion of this conversation is the same for both manga and movie, the scene was kinda salvaged in the manga because Goku was more surprised that Vegeta of all people is training using meditation, rather than him implying that training your mind is pointless like in the movie. During this interaction with Vegeta, Goku never mentions the gods of destruction and Jiren as a benchmark for power, because realistically speaking, they have long surpassed Jiren at this point. So how they handle Jiren is through Vegeta mentioning that his fighting style is superior to theirs because it involves relaxing your muscles and throwing explosive punches the moment you attack. Now when Goku and Vegeta finally get to fight, one noticeable difference that leads to another is Vegeta throwing Goku into the water and causing a splash, as opposed to suplexing him in the water. When the water splashes, a huge wave that engulfs Broly and everyone occurs, which makes Beerus look less like a simp to Shilai, because in the movie, the water was just little rain droplets as opposed to a massive wave that was just gonna drench everyone in water and making them wet. The next difference arises when Piccolo visits Dende on the lookout, when Dende says that only Namekians at a specific age unlock that ability, and he has definitely not reached that age yet. So Dende suggests that Piccolo asks Shenron to do that for him. But before that, on screen, he upgrades Shenron to be able to grant such a wish by pouring a liquid substance on a statue that resembles the dragon. In the manga, Dende states that he had already upgraded Shenron, meaning that it happened off screen, so we don't get to see Dende actually upgrading the dragon and doing what he did in the movie. When it was time for Shenron to grant wishes, the scene of Bulma's cosmetic wish is toned down severely in the manga, as well as the fact that in the movie, Shenron gives Piccolo and Bulma a mirror to look themselves in after granting their wishes, whereas in the manga, they had no mirror to look themselves in after receiving both their upgrades respectively. Now when the wish granting was finally over and it was time for the balls to scatter, in a manga only scene, we see that Trunks witnessed the whole wish granting ordeal involving his mother and Piccolo. This made Trunks suspicious that something serious is going on, so he calls Goten and tells him he should prepare for action because it's about to go down. We then move on to the Red Ribbon base where Piccolo infiltrates for the second time. This time, they were planning on kidnapping Pan to lure Gohan into their base. In the film, they mentioned that Piccolo is always at Gohan's house and that he may be a shadow boss for the evil Capsule Corp organization, while showing both their images on screen. This line of dialogue is firstly cut off in the manga, and only Gohan's image is shown up on the screen as they discuss the plan of kidnapping Pan. When the fake kidnapping of Pan is actually completed and it's time for Piccolo and Pan to leave, in a manga only sequence, one police officer tries to find Piccolo for parking an aircraft in the middle of the road, but he immediately changes his opinion and expression as soon as he realizes that Pan, who is the granddaughter of Mr. Satan, will be riding on that specific aircraft. Next up, the soldier that got one-shotted by Pan arrives to show Gohan that his daughter has indeed been kidnapped. In both the film and the manga, that prompted Gohan to turn into Super Saiyan out of anger, but it seems like he was more pissed off in the movie because he created a much larger crater that led to his house collapsing. Meanwhile, in the manga, the crater was smaller and his house was still standing after his burst of fury. Gohan then follows by demanding that the soldier takes him to Pan's location now, and as soon as they all arrive at the Red Ribbon base, the fake bat signal of the Red Ribbon army that we saw in the film is nowhere to be seen in the manga. But even that change is nothing in comparison to what Gohan did next. That is, as soon as Gohan saw his daughter crying out for help, he immediately jumped out of the airplane he was in, causing it to immediately explode. Therefore, in his mind, he knowingly killed the two soldiers that were riding with him inside. It was obvious that Piccolo, who was one of the soldiers in the aircraft that Gohan blew up, didn't die, but the fact that Gohan didn't know that one of the soldiers was Piccolo makes this even more shocking. I guess Gohan was so angry he was willing to kill to save his daughter. However, in the manga, only the windscreen of the aircraft broke and no explosion occurred. What did explode is Gohan himself, exploding off the ground and dashing towards Pan's rescue, only to be intercepted by Gamma 2's kick that pushes him back to the ground. In the manga, Toyotaro the artist made a mistake of drawing Gamma 2's costume with the number 1 on it, which is something that might have caused confusion for some readers. Moving on to something less confusing, we have a change whereby in the movie, after Gohan kicks down Gamma 1, he immediately rises up in a robotic manner and clashes his forehead equally against Gohan's. This then prompted Gamma 2 to trip and slam Gohan onto the ground, and followed by lastly delivering a burning kick that destroys the ground they both stood on. In the manga, Gohan does not fall to the ground due to Gamma's twisting slam. Their initial headbutt that was an equal clash in the movie takes the place of Gamma 1 slamming Gohan onto the ground, because in the manga, the headbutt knocks him down to the ground. This then leads into Gamma also sliding Gohan's body across the ground, and then lastly, just like in the movie, he follows with a burning kick that destroys the ground beneath both of them. When the floor collapses and they reach down, we see that the surrounding Red Ribbon soldiers flee in panic, but the movie shows them being more brave and only stepping back a little. Meanwhile, we have Gohan and Gamma 1 in an underground dungeon where they continue to fight each other. In there, Gamma 1 explains all of his misunderstanding that he was fed by the Red Ribbon to Gohan, and their conversation concludes down there, which is then followed by Gohan transforming inside the dungeon as well and emerging as a Super Saiyan onto the surface. In the movie, it's non-stop action and small talk inside the dungeon, resulting in both of them bursting out of there, continuing and concluding their conversation on the outside. That is until Gohan decides to transform into Super Saiyan outside on the surface as opposed to emerging when he's already transformed. As a Super Saiyan, Gohan shoots Gamma with a Kamehameha that the android manages to evade and retaliates with his own gun. But as we soon see, Gohan is strong enough to just smack away his blast. The manga does not change the smack, but what changes is that the one soldier who kidnapped Pan alongside Piccolo is shown to have survived and is emerging from the plane crash. But this guy can't catch a break, because soon after, the blast that Gohan smacked away almost takes his life, with him narrowly dodging it. And if you remember correctly, Gohan didn't just transform once before he went beast, but he did so twice. And when he did in the manga, it ties back to the fact that Krillin and the police department had been investigating Red Pharmaceutical because they believed it is the disguise for the Red Ribbon Army. As soon as Gohan transforms into his ultimate form to even the playing field against Gamma 1, the hologram barrier that was surrounding the Red Ribbon base dissipates. This immediately alerts the police who work alongside Krillin to discover the location of the Red Ribbon base. Following that, we see Krillin's boss Sergeant Nuts calling him when he's off duty and spending time with his family to request that he attends the important situation at the Red Ribbon base since it has just been uncovered. But as I had just stated, Krillin was busy spending time with his family as we first off saw them walking out of the cinema after watching a clean God movie. A major change we see is that Marin has grown to be taller than her own father, and fortunately she now has a nose, meaning she inherits neither of her father's flaws. Back to Krillin, and we see that his sudden call of duty causes a problem. 18 reminds him that they have plans together as a family. This then leads to Android 18 joining in on the mission because she does not fully trust Krillin, especially seeing that she was just on a call with a woman. So in the movie, right before Piccolo begins his second fight against Gamma 2, Pain breaks the handcuffs that Piccolo put on her, only for her to just stand there and watch the fight from the balcony. But in the manga, she breaks the handcuffs for a greater reason. The moment she sees that Carmine and Magenta are trying to run away, only then does she break the handcuffs and beats up Carmine in order to stop their escape plan. And as the fight between Piccolo and Gamma 2 continues to rage on, the manga adds a cool fight sequence that's absent in the film. After Piccolo throws rocks at Gamma 2, which the android easily destroys with his gun, he doesn't immediately use the special beam cannon like in the film, but the rocks were just a distraction that allowed him to double down on the offensive. Thus, Piccolo is able to kick Gamma's head, causing him to plummet to the ground. But before he hits the ground, Gamma 2 uses his gun like a jetpack to shoot the ground and propel himself towards the Namekian to kick his face. But Piccolo was not gonna let the disrespect slide. So in another manga edit sequence, we see quite a few tag team combinations. Both the Green Man and the Bookworm Son Gohan do a simultaneous attack where they charge up their full power attacks. Gohan uses his fist to cave in Gamma 1's face, and Piccolo knocks the batteries out of Gamma 2 with a highly powered kick. We also have the Gammas not letting the violation slide, so they decide to push Gohan aside and tag team stomp Piccolo through a building. And before they reach the ground, Gohan quickly returns to assist Piccolo by grabbing Gamma 1 aside to equalize the fight once again. After all this fluff, that is only when Piccolo uses the special beam cannon in the manga. This brings me to my only criticism with these extra fight scenes. They are literally added so that Orange Piccolo can happen right at the end of the chapter. The changes themselves are not bad, but the fact that they were added to an arc that was already a retelling made them quite unbearable. Sticking to the topic of Orange Piccolo, the only difference present during his transformation in the manga is that instead of Shenron manifesting and forming the Ajaysa tree on his back, as Piccolo falls into the pit, Shenron appears as a giant hologram avatar behind him, and the tree automatically forms by itself on Piccolo's back. The next one is quite a notable difference because in the movie, Bulma gathers everyone who will help out in the fight against Cell Max off screen, whereas in the manga, we see her trying to explain the situation to Trunks, only for him to reveal that he already knows everything because he investigated alongside Krillin before he was grounded by his mother for playing superhero. We also get to see how Goten got to be there. He was invited by Trunks earlier during the saga in the guise of being there to study alongside Trunks, when in reality, they were going to sneak out and join the fight from the beginning. Same thing applies for 18 and Krillin. They did not necessarily need Bulma's invitation because they were going to join the fight regardless. When everyone eventually arrives to assist against the Red Ribbon Army, because of Goten and Trunks' newfound passion of being superheroes, they immediately befriend the Gammas in the manga, whereas in the movie, they never interact with them entirely. Now, when Cell Max eventually awakens in the movie, the Gamma androids are the ones that initiate the attack, only for everyone else to jump in to help afterwards. But in the manga, before anyone else does anything, Goten and Trunks change into their superhero outfits and steal the spotlight for a few pages. They basically tell Gohan and Piccolo to recover while they deal with the situation at hand. And unlike in the movie, both of them actually turn Super Saiyan and do cool combo attacks together that manage to knock down Cell Max. We even see Trunks' punch alone actually shake Cell Max, which is nice to see. Watching Saiyaman X1 and Saiyaman X2 being so heroic causes the Gamma to drop some cool negative information. If you read the prequel saga, you will know that Goten and Trunks were involved in Dr. Hedo's arrest. So the Gammas also revealed that Dr. Hedo told them that his inspiration for creating them is Saiyaman X1 and Saiyaman X2, who are a pair of superheroes that were his enemies at that time. This then leads to a cool pose from all four of them, and then some solid 4-man combo attacks that knock Cell Max away a pretty long distance. But from there on, it all goes downhill and everyone has to intervene. As the severity of the situation worsens, it forces Goten and Trunks to fuse way earlier than they did in the movie. In their fuse state, they actually achieve way more than being a ping pong that bumps onto Cell Max's head, because they actually assist the others in trying to assist to shoot Cell Max's head. Speaking of Cell Max's head being shot, just like in the movie, Piccolo's headshot does nothing to Cell Max, but only triggers Cell Max's photon attack that spreads his power all over the place. Now, if you remember well in the movie, when Pen was running away from this specific attack, she learned how to fly in order to escape being killed by it. In the manga, she fails to fly on her own, and Krillin is the one who has to fly her to safety. After Piccolo's headshot failed, it was time for Gemma 2 to do his self-destruction in order to blow Cell Max's head. Meanwhile, everyone was still distracting Cell so that Gemma 2 can land his attack. The manga shows Krillin throwing a destructive disc at him and cutting a mouth blast headed for 18 in half, whereas in the movie, the destructive disc hits Cell's face to push him back a little. Next up, the manga reveals to us that while in the movie, Pan learns to fly out of desperation as she was running away from Cell Max's blast. In the manga, during the scene when Piccolo gives Gohan his last senzu bean, which Gohan ate with no difficulties or problems in the movie, Cell Max shoots it out of Piccolo's hand, causing it to fly away in the manga. Gohan then chases after it, but Cell Max grabs him by his leg and slams him down before he reaches to it. It is here that Pan jumps up from a high building to catch the bean, which then causes her to unconsciously learn how to fly, and then she throws the bean to her dad so that he can finally eat it and get back in the game. The events leading up to the trigger of Beast Gohan are also slightly changed. In the movie, Cell Max throws Piccolo into the air, blasts him with ki, and then catches him with his one hand, which Piccolo lies unconscious on. In the manga, it seemed like Cell Max wanted to vaporize Piccolo because he charges up this dark ki blast with electricity shooting out of it and throws it at him in the sky. This creates a massive explosion which makes Gohan think that Piccolo is really dead, but luckily Gemma 1 dove in front of the blast and created a shield similar to the one that Gemma 2 created to block Piccolo's special beam cannon earlier in the Arco movie. Another change in the manga is that Piccolo is not the only one who assists in attempts to hold down Cell Max from trying to avoid Gohan's special beam cannon. Gemma 1 manages to shoot off one of Cell Max's wings, and then Krillin and 18 also join in to break off his other wing. Trying to prevent Cell Max from flying away by breaking his wings is a change that made sense, but one that did not involves Gohan delivering his final blow to Cell Max. In the movie, Gohan no-diffs Cell Max's energy attack with his special beam cannon. It's not even a contest, but in the manga, this becomes a literal beam struggle to the point where we have Gemma 1 yelling at Gohan to push. This to me means that manga Gohan is slightly weaker than his movie counterpart. After all, he even needed Goten and Trunks to kick away Cell Max's hand, which was pushing back against Gohan's special beam cannon. It was only when his hand was kicked away that Gohan's ki attack penetrated through Cell's attack and eventually went all the way to his head. The nail in the coffin proving that manga Gohan is weaker is him panting after delivering his final attack, suggesting that the special beam cannon took a lot out of him. But in the midst of Gohan's confusing nerf, I bet you missed a sneaky change here, which is the fact that Goten and Trunks defused earlier in the manga. In the movie, they do not separate mid-combat, but their separation only happens after the battle is over. And this subtle change alone adds 3 more changes to the manga. Number 1, this early defusing tells us that the massive fight that led to the eventual defeat of Cell Max was much longer in the manga than it was in the movie, because in both mediums, the Gotenks fusion was roughly formed at the same time frame in the sequence of events, yet the manga has the separation of the fusion happening way earlier. This then also means that Goku and Vegeta's fight was more drawn out in the manga as well, because their fight began at roughly the same time for both manga and movie. Number 2, when Cell Max is eventually defeated and is about to self-destruct, Piccolo picks up Gotenks with his right hand and flies away to safety, carrying him alone, but the manga has him grab both of the boys on his giant hands unfused, thus flying away with both of them. Number 3, after the dust settles, Dr. Hedo explains to Bulma how he modified his skin to withstand damage. Bulma cringes in disgust, but Trunks calls out her hypocrisy, pointing out that she does modify her skin as well to remove her crow's feet. And for those who don't know what crow's feet is, it's basically the wrinkles that form on the side or the corner of a person's eyes. It typically occurs in older people because they've used those muscles repeatedly over the years through smiling, blinking, and other activities that engage those muscles. So it's basically a sign of aging. This is a bit bit different from the movie because Trunks does not point out Bulma's hypocrisy as an individual, but rather as part of the Gotenks fusion, which then leads to Bulma shouting at Trunks while he's still fused with Goten, only for the fusion to defuse a second later. Next up, we have Pan's training come in full circle when she demonstrates her newfound ability to fly to everyone as the final act that closes off the movie. During Pan's flight, we see Goten and Trunks fuse again into Gotenks in the movie. In the manga, they never fuse again for the second time. Another surprising twist the manga added is Carmine surviving at the end of this conflict. This scene also shows us that soldier number 15, who was killed by Gohan in the movie, survived and is the one carrying Carmine to safety. We then cut to Beerus' planet where Goku and Vegeta are on their last legs. In the movie, we only see the last tap that Vegeta delivered on Goku to claim victory, but the manga shows us the last attacks they have in the tank. Vegeta delivers a vicious uppercut that pushes Goku back, only for Goku to retaliate and also lands an uppercut on Vegeta's gut, and only then does the final tap to Goku's chest happen to declare Vegeta as the victor. As much as their fight was so manly that it brought Broly and Lemmo to tears, Whis and Shilai were so bored they both occupied themselves by playing cards. In the movie, this is different. Whis was drinking his tea and Shilai was lying on a chair waiting for the fight to conclude. It is only now that Whis remembers his staff in order to fix the ravaged landscape, so he goes to find it hiding behind a tree, to which he also notices Bulma is calling back. In the movie, because Goku and Vegeta's fight has concluded and the noise has died down, Whis finally hears the ringing of the staff on a pile of ice cream tubs. Notice that he didn't intend on fetching the staff so that he can fix the ravaged landscape like in the manga, but he was merely sent to the staff by Bulma's call. The last change of the entire arc is that in the manga, when Whis finally picks up Bulma's call, the manga gives us a look inside the airplane Bulma and her friends are in. We first see a wholesome panel that shows Goten, Trunks, Krillin and 18 sleeping after an exhausting battle, as well as Pan, who is also fast asleep while lying on Gohan's arms. And meanwhile Pan is sleeping on his father's arms. We hear Gohan acknowledge to Piccolo his mistake of putting his work above his own daughter. He then states that this needs to change, and to make up for it, he'll take his daughter to the amusement park. That's all the changes that were made to the manga which I could identify. So if I missed any, please tell me in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you on the next one.